actually be an invention as has been claimed. Now, previously we've been seeing a thing where they've been saying, oh, well, he invented this clock and he's a boy genius and all these sorts of things. Now, that may very well be true. He may actually be a rather smart young guy, and I think he is. And he may be a bit of an inventor, and I'm not going to dispute that claim. But I don't think, according to this evidence, that he actually built the clock. Now, that's where things start to get a little bit hazy. As it appears, it's actually a Radio Shack model clock. It's a Radio Shack catalog number 63756. And they've got a picture of it. The shape and design is pretty much a dead giveaway. It is the clock, unless he decided to build a clone of that exact clock using the exact parts that would be required. Then I'm pretty sure he built this clock. So, or rather, he took out the guts of this clock and put it into a pencil case. Now, again, that's not a criminal act. He took apart a clock and stuck it in a pencil case. That's not a criminal act, and I have no problem with him doing that. I've certainly done stranger things, and I don't think he had the intention of it being a bomb or a hoax bomb. I don't think he had that intention when all this was done. But still, things are looking a little bit strange, to say the least, when it comes to this whole clock fiasco, mainly because nobody can seem to make up their minds on what actually happened and why he brought it to school. And there seems to be some dispute about what actually happened between him and his engineering teacher. All sorts of different things. There's all sorts of different conflicts happening here with this clock story. And it's really weird. And I don't want to talk about it too much because it's really not that big of a deal. That's the other thing. The whole clock thing is really not that big of a deal. At least it's not as big a deal as big a deal as we might be led to believe. Because really, it's I wouldn't say it's a non-issue, but it's really not something that's all that important. Did he bring a clock to school? Did he build his own clock? Did he take it to school with the intention of it being a hoax bomb? I don't think he did with that one. But really, it doesn't particularly matter either. Who cares if he brought a clock to school and pretended that it was something that he built, even if he didn't, or maybe he did, who knows? It really doesn't matter. We keep talking about this story like it's just the most important thing ever, but really it doesn't matter all that much what's going on with this clock / hoax bomb or whatever it's supposed to be. It really doesn't actually matter all that much. So it's not something that I'm really hung up on. Initially, it seemed like a much bigger issue than it actually was, but now I'm seeing that it's really not that big of a deal. When you're looking into it, it seemed like a huge deal, but then you look into it a little bit more and you realize it actually doesn't really matter if he built a hoax bomb or if it's a clock or if it's something that he built himself or if it's something he bought in a catalog or what. It's really sort of a distraction from other events which are going on, so we'll move on. Now, here's something that's actually really cool. Hackers have created master keys to TSA-approved locks, and the TSA really doesn't care, is kind of the funny thing. So you can 3D print right now a lock, or rather a key, I should say, for a TSA-approved lock, and that's kind of cool because who doesn't want to break into some luggage? So for years, the US TSA, which is, of course, the Transportation Safety Agency, I'll put safety in big old finger quotes there, is a division of the Homeland Security apparatus, I guess, has now recommended that travelers in the United States buy and equip their luggage with a TSA-approved lock. The reason for this is, of course, because it means that the agency can get access to your bag instantly in the event that the TSA wants to inspect your luggage, rather than requiring agents to cut the lock physically in order to inspect its components. So that immediately sort of negates the entire purpose of having a lock, because it means it's not very secure at all. In fact, it's not secure in any sense of the word, because now you can get a TSA master key 3D printed to your own custom specification. So really, there's no reason to trust these TSA locks anymore. There's zero reason to trust these TSA locks, and really there's no reason to trust the TSA either. So there's that too, because it's been proven that the TSA is quite bad at its job, actually. Remember that DHS interview, or not interview, but that test where they managed to get several fake bombs onto airplanes through TSA security. So obviously, TSA security doesn't actually work all that well. So we're not really given a whole lot of reason to trust the TSA or any sort of governmental safety administration. So I don't. Now, here's where things start to get really funny is the TSA has a series of these locks, which are, TSA approved locks, and they have really simple keys that are master keys to unlock these TSA locks. Now, some idiot posted a picture of this key online as part of a news report. I think it was like the Daily Caller or something like that. And it turns out that you can 3D print a perfect copy of this key and open up any TSA lock that you want. So it's actually not hard to thwart the TSA, yet again, proving that. So for years, the TSA has recommended that travelers buy these locks, and now they shouldn't do that anymore. So in 2003, the Travel Sentry program introduced a new type of TSA-approved lock with a built-in back door, which immediately means it's not secure. A TSA agent armed with the appropriate tools could open the lock, inspect the item, and then send the luggage on its way. The entire system was meant to ensure that officials could still search luggage without forcing consumers to give up all of their security in the process, even though they totally are. The TSA recommended, according to Extreme Tech, that passengers use these locks on multiple occasions, despite growing concern that the devices might actually be, well, kind of compromised. This week, Ars Technica proved that 3D printing could be used to print new master keys, thereby obviating the entire point of buying a TSA lock in the first place, at least as far as security is concerned. So granted, luggage isn't particularly secure anyway, with or without a key, since soft-sided luggage can be cut into or the zipper can be compromised with just a pen, a ballpoint pen. But it's still embarrassing for an organization that holds itself forth as the gold standard in security that this sort of thing happens. So it's obviously not the gold standard of security, and I'm not sure if anyone ever actually believed that it was. The image in question, by the way, shows a whole swath of keys. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 total TSA keys that I'm counting here, and each one of them could be rather easily 3D printed. So that means that any key that you could ever want to TSA luggage can be 3D printed on a regular old consumer 3D printer, and you can gain access to any luggage you want. Now, that's not that bad, actually, because I've always wanted to steal something out of somebody's luggage, so I have no objections. The Intercept reached out to the TSA to discover how the organization intended to respond to the news, and discovered that it really doesn't care. Now, that's where things start to get kind of weird. The TSA doesn't particularly care that you can get into this luggage, saying these consumer products are peace of mind devices, not part of TSA's aviation security regime. So these TSA locks were never meant to be secure. They're not meant to be security devices. They are simply peace of mind devices. Kind of like the old story, if you watch Fight Club, where the oxygen mask drop down, and he explains that really they're not there to do any good. Oxygen masks are simply there on airplanes to calm you down before the plane crashes. And it seems like these TSA locks are there to do something sort of similar. They're to calm you down to make sure that you think your luggage is secure when actually it's not anywhere close to secure. I can tell you horror stories about planes, man. I mean, I haven't flown commercially, and I'm almost afraid to, not because of terrorists, but because of the TSA. I'm afraid of the TSA way more than I'm afraid of some Islamic extremist or whatever, because at least I could beat up an Islamic extremist and not be sent to prison, most likely, right? Like, I could shoot some sort of terrorist, be he IRA or whatever, without any sort of fear of repercussion. But I can't shoot a TSA agent because I'll be sent to jail very quickly. So that's sort of a contradiction there. Really, the terrorists are people who are causing terror. They're causing people to be afraid. And the TSA keeps pushing this idea that, well, terrorists could get into your stuff. Terrorists could hijack the plane at any minute. So really, it's the TSA that's pushing this agenda of terror more than the actual terrorists themselves. So the problem is, I can't shoot a TSA agent, nor would I, but the TSA agent poses a much greater threat to my personal security and my personal liberties than any terrorist ever would, because at least a terrorist is honest in his intentions, and a TSA agent either believes in his head or at least is going to tell you that what he's doing is the right thing and what he's doing is for your own safety. At least a terrorist is not going to try to tell you that. They're not going to try to push that narrative. So the problem with the TSA key is that it relied on the idea that only the right people, say TSA officials, would have access to the proper keys. Now, you remember ABC not too long ago did an expose about an iPad that was stolen by a TSA agent and was found at the TSA agent's house, and he claimed that he had no idea how it got there, even though we pretty much know he stuck it in his backpack and took it to his house. I mean, come on. So TSA agents have been proven, at least some of them, to steal things too. So there's not really a whole lot of reason to trust them. We keep saying, oh, national security, national security, national security, but I'm not really seeing a whole lot of security coming out of the nation here. I'm not seeing a whole lot of national security actually happening. It's just national security compromise, more like. Number to call in here is 423-800-8949. That's 423-800-8949 if you want to call in and, well, call in. Also, check out EJ Pelton. He's the numbers guy if you're worried about tax season, which we all are. EJ Pelton is an accounting company and tax service that helps you keep what you have earned. 37 years in business. Eric's a CPA. That's ejpelton.com, or call him at 622-3156, ejpelton.com, 622-3156. If you want to get in contact with EJ Pelton. Some of the guys down here at the radio station, by the way, are going to be going down to Delia's, which carries authentic Mexican food. They have a rich selection: loaded nachos, crazy chicken, homemade tamales, enchiladas with beef, chicken, and pork, and quesadillas on Dayton Pike near the Thrasher Light. They have the freshest ingredients cooked to perfection for lunch and dinner. Treat yourself to Delia's genuine Mexican food. None of that fake Mexican Taco Bell stuff. Delia's is real, authentic Mexican food. They have a taco salad. They have the taco platter, which is number 28 in the menu. They have free iced tea, all sorts of great stuff, free sweet tea. You really can't go wrong. That's Delia's authentic Mexican food over on Dayton Pike. So definitely check them out. The number to call in there is 521-7145. That's 521-7145. Again, the number to call into the studio, 423-800-8949. That's 423-800-8949. We got a ton of great programming here on Hot News Talk Radio. We have Daybreak USA from 6 to 9. Then from 9 to 11, we have the David Tulis Show. We've got Eric Judd. We have my show, Digital Drive. We talk about technology and quite a bit more. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity. Don't forget, 1 to 2 is Clutch with Keon Rose. In fact, he's just now pulling in. 1 to 2 is Clutch with Keon Rose, right here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. He's our resident sports expert right here on Hot News Talk Radio. He knows far more about sports than I do about computers, and that's saying something. And he's right here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. So the backdoor encryption method that the TSA uses is actually not very secure, because by definition, it puts a backdoor, which means by definition, it's not secure. That's like if you had the best blast door ever on your house. You've got a bank vault door on the front of your house, totally secure, amazing. Nobody's going to get through that bank vault door without the proper authentication. But your back door is just a regular old screen door. Anyone could kick through and get in. Well, that's sort of what's happening with the TSA, where the locks themselves, I mean, they're just as secure as any other combo lock is going to be, a combination lock that we all used in our high school lockers, except I didn't because I never went to school, but you get the idea. That's going to be pretty dang secure. I mean, it's not amazing, but it's pretty secure, unless you want to break into it with bolt cutters or something. But the other end is a key. You could 3D print this key and then unlock it. So it's not very secure at all. There's nothing whatsoever secure about this method of security. It's sort of the same thing that we're seeing with encryption now today as well, where a lot of encryption methods are really just not working because the government's wanting to put backdoors into them. Now, as it is now, encryption methods work. We know that. But the problem is the encryption methods are being compromised by people higher up in government, especially in the FBI. Look at the director of the FBI, James Comey, who's really pushing for this, a sort of a end to the era of strong and proper encryption. Unfortunately, we're seeing this happening where the FBI is wanting Apple especially to put security holes in its encryption, which would totally obviate the whole purpose of having encryption or security or any of that stuff. There's no reason anymore to have any of that if the FBI can just get right into your stuff. Now, if there's a back door that the FBI can get into, there's a back door that anyone can get into. And that's the thing. They seem to have this high and mighty idea that no one can reverse engineer the FBI's process for getting into this back door. And that's a very, very flawed way of thinking. Now, on the topic of encryption, Edward Snowden, our good buddy, the NSA whistleblower, former NSA contractor Edward Snowden, thinks that we might not be visited by aliens because we're using encryption. Yeah. Edward Snowden thinks he might have an answer to the Fermi paradox, the cosmological puzzle of why, given that the universe is so old and so very big, we haven't heard from any aliens yet. Speaking with Neil deGrasse Tyson on the Astrophysicist Star Talk podcast, Edward Snowden suggested that a universal need to keep communication secure could mean that alien signals are simply too well encrypted to be distinguished from the background noise. Now, that's an interesting idea. And actually, it's a pretty well-known method that we try to mask our own broadcast by making it blend in with naturally occurring backscatter, sometimes they call it. So when you look at encrypted communications, if they are properly encrypted, there's no real way to tell that they are encrypted. You can't distinguish a properly encrypted communication, at least in the theoretical sense, from random noise, says Edward Snowden. He suggests that over time, all societies realize that encryption is a necessity, as is, of course, security. Saying, so if you have an alien civilization trying to listen for other civilizations, or our civilization trying to listen for aliens, there's only one small period in the development of their society where all of their communications will be sent via the most primitive and most unprotected means. So when we're thinking about everything we're hearing from our satellites, or everything they're hearing from our civilization, if there are indeed aliens out there, and I personally don't think that there are, all their communications are encrypted by default. So what we're hearing, which is actually an alien television show or phone call or a message between their planet and their own GPS constellation, whatever that happens to be, is actually indistinguishable to us from cosmic microwave background radiation. So all this time, maybe, we've been listening to alien broadcasts and we just have never known it. So that would be rather an interesting theory, meaning that from the beginning, from the inception of radio communications, we were listening actually to alien broadcasts and we simply never knew it. Wouldn't that be strange? But think about it this way too. When you try to listen naturally, with a regular old radio, so you manage to tune that radio to 5 gigahertz for Wi-Fi, you're just going to hear random noise. It's going to sound like nonsense. You're not going to hear web pages. You're not going to hear web pages being scattered all throughout the cosmos. You're just not going to hear that. That's not going to happen because it's encrypted. That's the only way. It's a proper encryption method is being used there, from the Wi-Fi to the receiver. So, or from the router to the receiver, I should say, the access point to the receiver. So it sounds like random backscatter to you. And that's sort of the point of this topic of discussion, is alien broadcasts would simply sound like random noise as opposed to an actual broadcast. Plus, if you were a hyper-advanced alien civilization, would you really want to talk to us? I mean, we're kind of boring in the grand scheme of things. We philosophize about random things. Sometimes we kill each other. And overall, we're pretty boring if you were some highly advanced super organism or whatever. This is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. We are everywhere. Listen live to Hot News Talk Radio at hotnewstalkradio.com. Download the TuneIn Radio app for your smartphone and search for Hot News Talk Radio. Hot News Talk Radio is also on Twitter, where you report, the world decides. That's AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. Be sure to check us out on Twitter as well, and on the TuneIn Radio app for your smartphone. If you get the TuneIn Radio app for your smartphone, that's one of the best ways to listen to us, actually, because then you can listen to us on the go with your data connection on your phone. And that's a great way to listen. I know some of us still have flip phones for whatever reason, but if you don't, really, you're kind of missing out, because one of the best ways to listen to us is actually on TuneIn, because you don't have to worry about the signal dropping out or any of that nonsense. All you got to worry about is making sure your data plan is still there. And most of us have data plans these days anyway, so it's not really that big of a deal. I'm looking at this map right now that's in front of me, and it's a huge world map. And it's a map of every single military installation that we know of on the face of the earth. And when you look at the vast amount of military installations that are out there, it's no wonder that some countries are afraid of us. It's no wonder that countries are a little bit angsty perhaps about our military presence, and perhaps a little bit worried that we might pose some sort of threat to their national security. When you look at how many air bases and how many different military bases we have around the world, it's actually kind of frightening. We have so many. It's crazy. I didn't even know we had enough military personnel to house in all of these different military bases. But yeah, we have ones in Saudi Arabia. I'm seeing some, of course, in Iraq, and there's some near the border of Russia. They're not in Poland, interestingly enough. All these different military bases. There's one in Dalton, not far from where I live. And there's one, of course, in Chattanooga, a volunteer base, and all these different things. So many different military bases. Of course, there's Guantanamo Bay, of course, as well. It's insane. I had no idea we even had the personnel to house all these different military bases. And it makes you wonder if we're monitoring the communications of these other countries too, and infringing upon their freedoms. Well, before we get to that, we should talk about what our freedoms are being, which of our freedoms are being compromised. In fact, a sheriff in Sacramento County says that he doesn't even need a warrant to spy on you. He only needs judicial approval, whatever that means, to use his cell site simulator to spy on your cell phone communications. Is that happening here in Chattanooga? Well, we're going to try to find out. This is Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240. I'm your host, Russell. This is Digital Drive. Coming up at 1, of course, is Clutch with Keon Rose, his show about sports right here on Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240 and hotnewstalkradio.com. Also on the TuneIn Radio app for your smartphone.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? Just think I know nothing of my...
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Sky Aerial Services uses advanced drone technology to give you a better perspective and depth of your property and project. We offer aerial photography and video for your business, farm, home, or advertising campaigns, as well as editing services to complete the experience. Call us at 423-521-0284 and see how we can help you tell your story about your business, property, or project. We work with real estate professionals, both commercial and residential, developers, engineer inspectors, surveyors, ad agencies, auto and boat dealers, mapping services, insurance inspectors, corporate marketing, charity events, weddings, and photographers. Our consultation is free. Call 423-521-0284. That's 423-521-0284, or visit our website, skyaerialservices.com. Sky Aerial Services. The sky is our limit.
Here you are, working to keep your customers happy and to manage your cash flow. IRS problems are the last thing you need, but here they are, flapping about you like vultures. Get help from Eric Pelton and his team of accountants at E.J. Pelton Company. Audits, letters, proposed return changes, 1099s, penalty threats. Pelton Tax Resolution Services brings peace of mind and helps you keep more of what you've earned. EJPelton.com. Offices on Brainerd Road and in Soddy Daisy, just north of the Bilo. That's E.J. Pelton. Call 622-3156. Think ahead, 622-3156.
We've got a table here at Delia's in Soddy Daisy, ready to delight in a plate of authentic Mexican food. Delia's spreads a rich selection, loaded nachos, crazy chicken, homemade tamales, maybe the enchiladas with beef, chicken, pork, quesadillas. Every dish beautifully pictured on the menu to help us decide. Join us for lunch or dinner. We're at Delia's in Soddy Daisy on Dayton Pike near the Thrasher Light. Here's dinner. Delia's uses the freshest ingredients, cooked to perfection. Nachos, homemade. Delia's open every day except the Lord's Day. For lunch and dinner, treat yourself to Delia's genuine Mexican food. In Soddy, call 521-7145. That's 521-7145.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Costa, host of the Costa Report every Sunday at 9 a.m. My guest this week is former Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Central Command, General Anthony Zinni, who'll be here to explain what it will take to stop the ISIS momentum. Don't miss General Anthony Zinni this Sunday at 9 a.m. on the Costa Report, right here on AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio.
This is America Now with Meghan McCain.
Al Gore running is crazy. You're flying around in your private jet all over the world, and you want average Americans to care about the environment. Don't you think you should be doing your part as well?
Meghan McCain, weekdays at 7 p.m.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hi, I'm David Tulis, inviting you to make the move with me 9 to 11 a.m. weekdays here at AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. The David Tulis Show, featuring Nooganomics.com for Chattanooga and beyond. 9 to 11 a.m. weekdays.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Fox News Radio. I'm Pam Puso. Pope Francis celebrating Mass in eastern Cuba. Tomorrow he'll fly to the U.S.
The Pope's first stop is Washington, D.C., where many are looking forward to his address to a joint Congress.
Fox's Kelly Wright. The Pope will also visit New York and Philadelphia. Behind bars without bail, Michael McCarthy, the Massachusetts man accused of killing the 2-year-old girl known for months as Baby Doe. The child's mother also charged as an accessory. She is being held on $1 million cash bond.
She asked Mr. McCarthy what he had done, and he did not tell her. But he said she was a demon anyway. It was her time to die.
Suffolk County Assistant DA David Deacon. An explosion and fire have leveled a home in North Texas. Authorities say several people hurt, 9 other homes damaged. Fox News, we report, you decide.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Fox News Talk 1240.
So the sheriff in Sacramento County does not actually understand legalities. He doesn't actually understand Constitution, and probably doesn't care to as well. This is Digital Drive. I'm your host, Russell. We're talking about technology and quite a bit more as well here on Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240. The Sacramento County Sheriff has announced a new cell site simulator policy earlier this week, saying that it's going to be seeking judicial authorization when deploying the devices, which are also known as stingrays. Now, the thing is, here's where we start to get in bad territory here. This is like where the landmines start to come in, right? We're going to misstep and blow up, which I think has already happened over in California, where it seems like in Sacramento anyway, they've sort of just blown up. The problem is, the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department doesn't seem to understand or care about constitutional rights here, because obviously it's not legal to spy on somebody's cell phone without a warrant. In fact, I can read you the precise passage from the Constitution itself right here. I just got to flip over to it. I know I have it here. It's here we go. 4, search and seizure. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched or the persons or things to be seized. Now, that's very specific, isn't it? Now, a phone, obviously a cell phone would fall into that category. In fact, that's been determined already by the Supreme Court that a phone would fall into that category. So then spying on it, in a sense, stealing its houses, or at least its papers and effects, not houses or persons, but its papers and effects from that phone, is not legal without a warrant, which has to be supported by oath or affirmation based on probable cause. If that's not there, then this isn't legal. And it doesn't appear that that's there. So in a press release, the largest law enforcement agency in California's state capital region touted that it was the first law enforcement agency in the country to release such a policy. Well, thanks. The new policy comes just days after the SCSD admitted for the first time in a court filing that it had used its stingray without any judicial authorization. The SCSD also published and distributed its non-disclosure agreement with the FBI. Now, the reason there's a non-disclosure agreement with the FBI, you might be a little bit confused about that, is because the FBI sort of brokers the distribution of these cell site simulators from the Harris Corporation. So what happens is the Harris Corporation manufactures these stingray devices, and then the FBI brokers them out to these different law enforcement agencies. And then that's where we have cell site simulators being used locally. And sometimes they get brokered out to, say, a what's the word I'm looking for? A U.S. Marshal. So a U.S. Marshal's office can use these cell site simulators without any real repercussions. And of course, they can deploy anywhere in the country, like we may or may not have seen here locally, where somebody was found within a building where nobody said he was. So how did that happen? Well, who knows, really? So the Sheriff's Department did not respond to Ars Technica's request for comment, nor did it when Ars Technica wrote about the agency's secrecy in June of 2015, when they reported that the agency had used the device over 500 times previously. In a videotaped press conference, Sheriff Scott Jones over in Sacramento says, "I am extremely confident." You have to excuse me, I've got allergies kicking in real bad. Sheriff Scott Jones says, "I'm extremely confident that we can balance the rights and privacy interests of citizens with our need to protect citizens, find bad guys, and potential missing or kidnapped persons." I like how he says the general term of bad guys without really determining what those people are or who those people are. It's just, bad guys. I mean, the bad guys. Bad guys. So despite the SCSD claim, its new policy comes nearly 2 weeks after the Department of Justice imposed a warrant requirement for stingray use by its agencies, which would include the FBI and the ATF as well, by the way. So that means then that the ATF has to get a warrant and the FBI has to get a warrant, but sheriff's departments, for some reason, don't. So to be clear, the DOJ requirement, it has no bearing on policies of other federal, state, or local law enforcement agencies, like SOCOM or any of these other agencies which use cell site simulators. So plus, The new Sacramento County Sheriff's Department policy comes months after the state of Washington imposed a warrant requirement when such devices are used by state law enforcement departments. A few other states, including Utah and Virginia, also have similar mandates requiring the police to go to a judge with a probable cause-driven warrant to be able to use the Stingray devices, which sounds actually legal. Wow, you're actually going to get a warrant to spy on somebody? That's the only legal way to go about it, really. But unfortunately, that's not a trend that we're seeing continue very often. Unfortunately, we're seeing that as sort of just a footnote in the grand scheme of all these different sheriff's offices using Stingray devices. And I don't know, to be quite candid, I don't actually know if the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office uses a Stingray device because there's not been any determination on that. And being a Georgian, I can't file a Freedom of Information Act request in Hamilton County because I'm actually a resident of the state of Georgia in Catoosa County, so I can't actually do that. Well, simply seeking a judge's approval is far lesser standard than an actual authorized Fourth Amendment search, which would require a probable cause showing in a warrant application the evidence of a crime will likely be found, and it has to be an affidavit supported by oath or affirmation. So that's a whole long process, as it should be. This is holding back government instead of facilitating it, and that's good because government should be held back and not facilitated. If government were facilitated, we would live in sort of like a Soviet Union sort of situation where the government is supposed to provide everything but really fails in that pretty much a few months after its inception. So that's what we see a lot of the time with different governmental institutions. They just don't work. Like, say, government-provided healthcare. It might work short-term, but the money's going to run out eventually. Plus, it's based on coercion and force, which is immoral anyway, because you're forcing money out of people, which is something which I'm morally opposed to. You're coercing money out of people, which is not really a great thing. So state-supported systems like these never last any time at all. Or at least in the grand scheme of things, they don't last any time at all. Like we say, well, the Soviet Union almost lasted 100 years, right? But consider all the different civilizations which have lasted thousands of years. So it's really not that long in the grand scheme of things. So not only can stingrays be used to determine location by spoofing a cell tower, they can also be used to intercept calls and text messages. Once deployed, these devices intercept data from a target phone, as well as information from other phones within the vicinity. For years, federal and local law enforcement have tried to keep their existence a secret while simultaneously upgrading their capabilities, including over in Sacramento County. So over the last year, as the devices have come under increased scrutiny, new information about the secretive devices has come to light. Our Seneca previously reported that while stingrays have been used at local level for serious violent crimes, they've also been used to investigate ATM robberies and 911 hang-ups. Now, a 911 hang-up is, at the very worst, really just sort of a thing that happens. At the least, it's an accident. At the worst, it's a prank call. And that's not that bad when it comes right down to it. I mean, that's not the worst thing that can ever happen in the grand scheme of things. A 911 hang-up is certainly not good, but it's also not the worst thing. It's not the worst crime that anyone could commit. I mean, it's not a murder. It's not like an awful rape or anything like that. It's someone accidentally or intentionally hanging up on 911, and that's not really that serious of a crime. And yet stingray devices are being used to spy on people's cell phones in order to determine who the awful criminal was who hung up on 911. Now, you're going to see people on Facebook commenting that anyone who hangs up on 911 should be strung up or whatever, but those people don't understand liberty, which is not surprising considering that they're on Facebook all day. I can't imagine that they understand much of anything. In 2015, federal authorities have shown a willingness to open up a little bit about the technology, although the FBI declared in January that it has a right to use the devices in public without a warrant. Now, wait a minute. That would mean that any cell phone communication that you make walking down the street is somehow not constitutionally protected. I don't know where they get that from, because that's obviously not true. Now, you do have a reasonable expectation of privacy because you're reasonably expecting privacy, right? When you're walking down the street talking on your cell phone, you're expecting that other people can't hear at least the other end of the conversation. That would be a reasonable expectation of privacy, which you would have. But they're trying to determine that You don't have that even when you're walking down the street, and thus they can spy on you simply by merit of you walking down a alleyway that you paid for with your tax dollars, which somehow you don't actually have the right to walk down, or something along those lines. So as it states, the request for judicial authorization shall include an advisement that the RF equipment, that's radio frequency equipment, will send signals to all cellular devices within range, which will cause the devices to emit unique identifiers. An advisement when the intent is to determine unique identifiers at multiple locations and or multiple times, and an advisement that all data collected during the use of RF equipment will be deleted at the conclusion of the use. Now, whether or not that's true, we don't know. They could easily say, oh, we forgot to get rid of that backup, and that wouldn't be that hard to do. So that's not something that I would put a whole lot of faith in. Now, the funny thing is, the FBI really doesn't want you to know about the whole Stingray device thing, which means that I really want you to know about the whole Stingray device thing, because I am by no means a fan of the FBI. In fact, I really don't like the FBI. I don't like any government agency, and that's putting it lightly. I really don't like the CIA. They're a bunch of terrorists. I don't like the FBI because they're a bunch of fearmongers, and they don't actually investigate very many things to a proper extent, and also they violate your Fourth Amendment rights, so not a fan. Why not just have the sheriff's offices do these things for us? I'm not a fan of the Secret Service, obviously, because they're enforcing a monetary system which is immoral, and I really don't like any of the other three-letter agencies, DHS, or Department of Homeland Insecurity, the Border Patrol, because I don't support enforcement of borders the way we do it. I don't really like any of these three-letter agencies, and the four-letter agencies like DARPA are even scarier. So I don't like any of these agencies. I see no reason to support them. I see no reason to trust them, and I especially see no reason to pay for them. Why should I pay for things which I am fundamentally opposed to? That doesn't really make any sense. That's like forcing a Christian to pay for an abortion, or forcing a Muslim to pay for a pig farm. You wouldn't make someone do that. But for some reason, if it's described to be for the common good, it's suddenly okay. You wouldn't make a Jewish person pay for a sausage factory, because that's against their beliefs. You wouldn't make a Christian pay for an abortion mill because it's against their beliefs. The list goes on. You wouldn't make a Hindu person pay for a cow farm. That would ultimately lead to the slaughter of the cattle. They wouldn't want to do that. So there's all sorts of different things where we would understand the exception, but for some reason, if it's done through the buffer, the proxy of government, it's suddenly okay. Like, I am fundamentally opposed to the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War and all sorts of other ones. So why would I then support it through money, through the governmental systems? I don't understand why suddenly that's okay that government does it in my name. I don't get it. Why should I pay for these things? And the same goes for these Stingray devices. Why should I pay for these devices which are going to ultimately spy on me and violate my rights? It's like I'm paying for them to violate my rights, and I'm thanking them for it, saying, well, at least they do a good job. You know, they put their lives on the line to violate my rights, so I guess it's okay. I don't understand that mentality. I've never understood that mentality. I see all these people who are such bootlickers who say, oh, well, you know, we need them because they put their lives on the line and yada, yada. Well, guess what? If they're violating my rights, I don't really care how much of their lives they put on the line, because they're violating my rights. They're fundamentally opposing me. They're oppressing me even. So why should I support them, saying, well, you know, it's a dangerous thing they do when they suppress me, so I guess it's okay. Oh, well then. It doesn't make any sense at all. Well, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, in sort of a similar vein, says that next week the Department of Justice will likely decide whether to issue a grant to the Los Angeles Police Department to purchase 700 body-worn video cameras, because the LAPD's body camera policy fails to ensure accountability and transparency and would, in fact, hide almost all video camera footage from the public. So the EFF is urging the Department of Justice to deny funding. Now, initially, it seemed like body cams on the cops was actually kind of a good idea. But when you read into it, it becomes readily apparent that this is actually not a very good idea. Because one, it makes every policeman a walking video camera, which is not so great. It makes every policeman a walking surveillance camera, which I'm not really a fan of. but also it means that any video they take can and will be used against you. And it means that there's next to no accountability. Like they say, there's not going to be any sort of public record where you can review all of the video that they take from the last month or whatever. You're not going to see that. So potentially a argument changing video in a court case simply won't be released because they say, well, it was deleted after a week or what have you. LAPD applied for the grant to fund its body-worn camera program through the Bureau of Justice Assistance, or BJA, body-worn camera pilot implementation program earlier this year. After the shootings in Ferguson, Missouri, and other places around the country created a national discourse about the need for police accountability, President Obama announced plans then to strengthen community policing, including contributing $75 million over the last 3 years to provide a 50% match grant to states and localities that purchase body-worn cameras. So obviously the feds want there to be body cams, which means I don't want there to be body cams. The LAPD could be the first law enforcement agency to receive funds under this new grant. Now, what does this mean for you or I? That's the big question. How is this local? How does this have any bearing on us whatsoever? Well, this could quickly be coming to Hamilton County. In fact, they've been looking at body cameras for Hamilton County, turning every Hamilton County, or at least Chattanooga City police officer, I should say, into a walking surveillance camera, which again is not a great idea, because then it means that every Chattanoogan who's in eyesight of a policeman is now under surveillance by the cops. And again, that creates a feeling, it creates a system of paranoia, where they're like, oh, I better film everything. Now, you should film every official encounter you have with the cops. There's no doubting that. And I wouldn't have a problem with the police also filming a official encounter that you have, because accountability is important on both sides. Okay, that's fine. And especially if you're in public, that does make sense. If this is an official encounter and the policeman wants to personally whip out a cell phone, he has the right to do that just as much as I do. I understand that. But when we're talking about in an official capacity, every policeman in uniform is essentially monitoring every citizen who's walking down the street. That's no better than having the cameras like they do in Britain, where there are surveillance cameras everywhere watching everyone do anything. And they constantly dispatch police to catch bike thieves or whatever without going through any sort of proper system where there's a police report that's made, somebody calls the police, yada, yada. It doesn't make any sense how we're doing it here. Well, at least it does from a police state standpoint. That makes perfect sense. But from a freedom standpoint, it really doesn't make any sense whatsoever. From a freedom standpoint, it's very oppressive. But from a police standpoint, it's very oppressive, which is good for them. And it's also very controlling, which is, of course, good for them, because police are all about control. That's what it comes right down to. Police departments are not about protecting and serving, despite which they may have on the side of their vehicle. Certainly, some cops may be, but the intent of the broader organization is control and money collection for the city more than anything. Now, an individual cop may very well have the best intentions in the world, and an individual cop may very well be a great guy who's only going to do his job the right way. And that's fine, and that's cool, and I get that there are cops who do that. And probably a lot of them are here in Chattanooga, because I know Chattanooga is a good city for that. But as much as there are those cops, there are also cops who are going to be acting as the monetary wing, the monetary collection wing of the city government, enforcing statute and collecting money for you speeding. Something that's totally lawful. It's illegal perhaps, but it's lawful for you to go over the speed limit, because it's just an arbitrary number. It's not necessarily a sin to go over the speed limit, and yet you'll be fined $50 or $100 or $250 if you're like me for going too fast, and also perhaps getting in front of a car a little bit too closely for the cops' liking. Then they'll view that as cutting in, and you'll get charged with $250, or at least you'll be ticketed for $250. That doesn't seem quite lawful. It doesn't seem quite moral. No wrong has actually happened. There's not been any damages. See, that's the thing. Legalities and laws used to be based upon damages, where there was damage done to someone, thus I have to pay restitution. If I'm speeding and I don't hurt anybody, there's no damage actually done. No one's been harmed. There's no moral wrong happening here. And thus there's no damages, and thus there's no restitution to pay. Unless you get caught by a policeman, in which case there is restitution to pay for the city. But how am I damaging the city by going over the speed limit? I'm really not. So again, it's just a system of control. It's just collection of funds. It's just money gathering. That's all there is to it. And that's all it comes down to. And personally, I don't support that. I don't see how anyone could possibly support that. And yet so many people do. because they say, oh, well, they put their lives on the line and thus it's okay. They're just doing their jobs and thus it's okay. Well, frankly, if your job is to enforce laws which are inherently immoral, possibly you should find another line of work. It's like back in the days of Nazi occupation where they're like, well, they're checking our papers every day, but you know what? They're just doing their jobs. They're just 18-year-old kids who are enlisted into the German army, and really they're just doing their jobs. So maybe we should cut them a break. Nobody would say that, except for the instigator who's within the group who's being paid off by the German government to say that. You see? So it's a very frustrating situation in the long run. Very frustrating. The number to call in today is 423-800-8949. That's 423-800-8949. 423-800-8949 if you want to call into the radio station here at Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240 and hotnewstalkradio.com. Be sure to check us out also on the TuneIn Radio app for your smartphone. Just search for Hot News Talk Radio on the TuneIn Radio app for your smartphone, and you can listen to us streaming live there as well. And also on Twitter, by the way, Hot News Talk Radio on Twitter, where you can check us out there as well. So lots of great ways to listen to us here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. Air Force fighters are apparently going to be carrying laser weapons and cyber weapons by the year 2020. Yet another example of government finding out great ways to kill us better. Sometime very soon, according to our Seneca, combat aircraft may be zapping threats out of the sky with laser weapons, saying, I believe we'll have directed energy pods that we can put on a fighter plane very soon, says Air Force General Hawk Carlisle. The man's name actually is Hawk Carlisle. I'm pretty sure there was a comic book made about him at some point. That's what he said at this week's Air Force Association and Airspace Conference in a presentation on what he called the 5th generation warfare, saying that that day is a lot closer than I think a lot of people think it is. So what he's saying is these laser weapons coming on planes might be coming a lot sooner than we thought. Because usually we think of the far future, we think of all the way, 2035 or whatever, but actually we could potentially be talking about next 5 years, 2020. Hey, do you remember the movie Blade Runner? I do. It's actually my favorite movie of all time. I love Blade Runner. I watch it probably once every, maybe twice a year about is when I watch Blade Runner. Absolutely my favorite movie. Did you know that that movie is actually set in 2019? Well, unless you go by the monologue at the beginning of the movie, in which case it takes place in 2020, but the script says 2019. So we are less than 5 years away from the time in which Blade Runner takes place. Think about that for a second. 2015 is the year in which Marty McFly rode a hoverboard in Back to the Future 2. So, wow. The future is wild. Imagine how we saw the future back in the 80s and how we see the future now in the 2000s, or 2010s, I should say. It's changed a lot, hasn't it? It's a lot more cyber-centric. It's a lot more information-centric. It used to be very gadget-centric back in the 80s because that's what the 80s is all about, the next cool gadget. But now in the 2010s, it's more about the next cool application, the next way we can communicate with each other. It's changed a lot. Communications have changed a whole heck of a lot in just the last few years. So it's really interesting to see how things have changed and are going to continue changing throughout the rest of forever until the world ends, which could be very soon. In fact, it could be about 2 days from now. So we'll see. Anyway, this is Digital Drive right here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. Watch out for the 23rd of September because that's when the world is supposed to end. Or maybe it's the 25th when there's an asteroid strike. Who knows? This is Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240 here on hotnewstalkradio.com as well. Clutch with Keon Rose is coming up next year on Hot News Talk Radio. He is our resident sports expert right here on Hot News Talk Radio. He talks about sports from his own very, well, sportsy perspective, I guess. He knows more about sports than I do about computers, which is certainly saying quite a lot. And he's our, still got the allergies going on. He's our resident sports expert right here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. Again, don't forget to check us out on Twitter, where you can also check out our past shows on YouTube, Hot News Talk Radio on YouTube. And that's about it. This is Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240 and hotnewstalkradio.com.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? Just think I know nothing of my...
You give us 12 minutes and 40